Hello everyone, I am the Storyteller, and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching now? Get comfortable and relax. Jenny's words cut through my sleep like a knife. Please don't touch me. Her voice was small, desperate. My eyes snapped open in the darkness of our bedroom. I lay still, listening to my wife's breathing next to me. She was still asleep, but her face was twisted in distress. The bedroom was quiet except for the soft whir of the ceiling fan. Then I noticed the blankets at the foot of our bed. They lifted slightly, like someone was gently pulling them up, but there was nothing there. My heart started pounding against my ribs. The movement wasn't from the fan. It was too deliberate, too focused in one spot. I watched as a depression formed in the mattress at the foot of the bed, like someone was sitting there. The weight made the whole bed shift slightly. "No, stay back," Jenny mumbled, turning her head on the pillow. Her eyes were still closed, but her fingers clutched at the sheets. I wanted to wake her, but my body wouldn't move. My throat felt tight, like I was being choked. The depression in the mattress deepened. Whatever was sitting there was getting heavier. A car drove past outside, its headlight sweeping across the room through the blinds. For just a second, I thought I saw a shadow where nothing should be, a darker patch of darkness at the foot of our bed. But when the light faded, there was nothing visible there, just a blanket still pulled up in that unnatural way. My hands were shaking as I reached for the bedside lamp. I had to see what was happening, but before I could turn it on, Jenny's whole body went rigid beside me. "Get out," she said in her sleep. Her voice was different now, angry instead of afraid. "This isn't your place. You need to leave." The depression in the mattress vanished. The blanket settled back into place, but the temperature in the room dropped so fast I could see my breath clouding in front of my face. Jenny's eyes flew open, and she sat up with a gasp. "What's wrong?" she asked, looking at my face. "Your wife is a sheep." I told her what had happened. Watching her expression change from confusion to fear as she remembered fragments of her dream. She said she'd been dreaming about her grandmother, not her real grandmother who died when Jenny was in college, but a twisted version that kept trying to climb into bed with us. We didn't sleep the rest of that night. We sat up with all the lights on, drinking coffee and trying to convince ourselves it had just been a dream affecting us both somehow. But we knew it wasn't true. Something had been in our room. The next few nights were quiet, too quiet, like something was holding its breath, waiting. Jenny started taking sleeping pills to avoid the dreams, but I could tell they weren't working completely. She would twitch and mutter in her sleep, her face drawn with tension. I installed a motion-activated camera at the foot of our bed. The first 2 nights, nothing showed up on the footage, but on the third night at exactly 3:47 a.m., the camera's infrared light turned on, detecting movement. The video showed the blankets moving on their own, rising and falling like someone was breathing under them. The temperature reading in the corner of the frame dropped from 72 degrees to 45. In less than a minute, I didn't show Jenny the footage. She was already having trouble sleeping, and I didn't want to make it worse. Instead, I started researching. I read everything I could find about sleep paralysis, shared dreams, and supernatural encounters. Most of it was useless, just stories from people trying to explain away their fears. But one account caught my attention. A woman in Oregon described almost exactly what we were experiencing. She said it started after her mother died, and the presence would sit on her bed every night at the same time. It never hurt her, but it seemed to be waiting for something. She finally got rid of it by having her house blessed by a local priest. I'm not religious, but I was desperate enough to try anything. I called several churches in our area, finally finding an elderly priest who listened to my story without judgment. Father Martinez came to our house the next day. He walked through each room slowly, sprinkling holy water and reciting prayers in Latin. When he reached our bedroom, he stopped at the foot of the bed. His hands were trembling as he made the sign of the cross. "There was something here," he said quietly, "something old, but it's not evil, just lost. Sometimes spirits get confused, especially if they had a strong connection to a place or person in life." That night, Jenny had another dream, but this time when she talked in her sleep, her voice was calm. "It's okay," she said. "I understand now. You can go home." The temperature dropped again, but not as severely as before I felt a breeze pass through the room, like someone walking quickly past me. Then Jenny sighed in her sleep and rolled over peaceful for the first time in weeks. We never felt the presence. Again after that night, Jenny remembered more of her dream the next morning. She said her grandmother, her real grandmother this time, had come to explain the spirit wasn't trying to harm us. It was another woman who had lived in our house decades ago. She had dementia, near the end of her life, and would often get confused walking into the wrong bedroom thinking it was her own. Even after death, she kept coming back to what she thought was her room, not understanding why strangers were sleeping in her bed. Jenny's grandmother helped her remember who she was and guided her away. I still have the video footage from that last night. If you watch carefully, you can see two sets of footprints form briefly in the carpet, before fading away, one shuffling and uncertain, the other steady and sure. Leading the first toward the door, we kept the house, but we rearranged our bedroom. The bed is against a different wall now, and we painted the room a new color, not to keep spirits away. We're not afraid anymore, but to make the space truly ours. Sometimes on quiet nights I think about that confused spirit and feel grateful for Jenny's grandmother helping her find peace. It would be easy to tell this story as a ghost story to focus on the fear and uncertainty we felt, but in the end it wasn't about fear at all. It is about compassion, about helping a lost soul find its way home. Jenny doesn't have nightmares anymore. She sleeps peacefully through the night, and the foot of our bed stays undisturbed. But every now and then when I wake up at 3:47 a.m., I whisper a quiet thank you to both grandmothers, the one who helped and the one who needed helping. Then I roll over and go back to sleep knowing our room belongs to us. Alone we still live in that house. The motion sensor camera is still running, but it hasn't picked up anything unusual in months. The temperature stays steady through the night. The only movements in our bedroom are the normal ones: cats walking across the floor, shadows from passing cars, the gentle rise and fall of blankets as we breathe. Life has returned to normal, or as normal as it can be after an experience like that. We don't talk about it much anymore, but we haven't forgotten. How could we? Some experiences change you forever, even if the change is subtle. I still wake up sometimes in the middle of the night, my heart racing from half-remembered dreams, but now instead of fear, I feel a strange sense of peace. The foot of our bed is just the foot of our bed, no depressions in the mattress, no mysterious movements in the blankets. Jenny says she sometimes dreams of her grandmother, but they're good dreams now. They sit together in a sunny kitchen drinking tea and talking about nothing in particular. When she wakes up, she smiles and squeezes my hand. We've learned to live with the memory of those strange nights. We've made peace with the idea that there are things in this world we can't fully understand, but we're not looking for answers anymore. Sometimes it's enough just to know that even in the darkest moments, there's always a way back to the light. The motion sensor camera is still running, its red light blinking steadily in the corner of our room. Sometimes I think about taking it down, but I leave it up, not because I think we'll need it again, but because it reminds me that even in our most rational moments, we should stay open to the inexplicable. Our bedroom is different. Now we've made it our own space, filled with our own memories, the old spirits. Confusion is gone, replaced by the comfortable familiarity of our life together. And if sometimes late at night, I think I hear footsteps in the hallway or feel a sleep-like chill in the air, I don't panic anymore. Instead, I listen to Jenny's steady breathing beside me, watch the moonlight make patterns on our walls, and remember that every story, even the strangest ones, eventually finds its end. Our ghost story ended not with terror or tragedy, but with understanding and peace. The digital clock still glows in the darkness, marking the hours as they pass, but 3:47 a.m. is just another time now, no more significant than any other, and that perhaps is the greatest piece of all, knowing that even the most haunting moments can fade into memory, leaving us changed, but not broken. Life goes on in our house. We wake up each morning, make coffee, go to work, come home, and sleep in our bed without fear. The only presence in our room now is our own, and that's exactly how it should be. Sometimes late at night when I can't sleep, I think about writing down the story, but then I realize that some experiences don't need to be preserved. In writing, they live on in the quiet moments, in the peaceful nights, in the understanding that sometimes the scariest things aren't scary at all. They're just lost looking for their way home, and so our life continues, marked not by the strange events of those few weeks, but by the ordinary moments that make up our days. We found our peace with what happened, and that peace is stronger than any fear we felt during those dark nights. The foot of our bed is just the foot of our bed now, and that's enough. The first time I heard the laughter, I was cleaning out the kitchen cabinets on a Tuesday afternoon. It wasn't funny laughter. It was wrong. The sound hit me like ice water down my spine, deep, guttural, and somehow what no one should have been in my garage. I, live alone in a small house on the outskirts of Portland, Maine. My nearest neighbor is a quarter-mile down the road. I'd moved here 6 months ago after my divorce, wanting the isolation the garage sits detached from. The house, connected by a covered walkway, the previous owner had used it as a workshop. That afternoon, I was going through the motions of my usual cleaning routine. Martha, my ex-wife, used to say I was obsessive about keeping things organized. Maybe she was right, but the routine helped keep my mind off things, the empty house, the silence, the memories. I had just finished wiping down the inside of the upper cabinets when I heard a low chuckle at first, then building into that wet, gurgling laugh. It seemed to echo off the garage walls, carrying through the thin door that connected to the kitchen. My hands froze on the cabinet door. The laugh came again. Longer this time. It sounded like someone choking while trying to laugh, a horrible liquid sound that made my stomach turn. I grabbed the baseball bat I keep next to the refrigerator. The weight of it felt good in my hands. As I moved toward the garage door, my heart pounded against my ribs. Who's there? I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm armed, and I've called the police. I hadn't called anyone, but they didn't need to know that the laughter stopped. I waited, counting my breaths. 1, 2, 3, nothing but silence. My hand shook slightly as I reached for the doorknob. I turned it slowly, then yanked the door open. Bat raised. The garage was empty. Sunlight filtered through the dusty windows, illuminating my workbench tools hanging neatly on their hooks. Boxes of holiday decorations stacked in the corner. Nothing was disturbed. No footprints in the dust on the concrete floor. No sign anyone had been there. I checked behind every box under the workbench, in the small storage closet. Nothing. The side door was still locked. From the inside, the windows sealed shut. Must be hearing things, I muttered, lowering the bat. Working too hard. I went back inside, double-checking the locks, but I couldn't shake the sound from my mind. That horrible wet laughter. The rest of the day passed normally. I finished cleaning the kitchen, made dinner, watched some TV. By bedtime, I had almost convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Almost. I went through my nighttime routine, mechanically brush teeth, wash face, take medications, check all the doors and windows, set the alarm, the same things I'd done every night since moving. In sleep came eventually, but it didn't last. The sound jerked me awake at 2:07 a.m. The same laugh, but closer now, much closer. It was coming from the hallway, right outside my bedroom door. My body went rigid under the cover. Sweat broke out across my forehead despite the cool air from the ceiling fan. The laugh came again, wet and gurgling like someone drowning in their own amusement. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My eyes fixed on the thin strip of darkness visible under the door. A shadow passed through that strip of darkness. Something was out there. The floor doorboards creaked. Another laugh right at my door. Now the doorknob began to turn slowly. So slowly I lunged for the bedside lamp, fingers fumbling with the switch light. Flooded the room. The doorknob stopped moving. The laughter cut off abruptly. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my throat. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands, pulled up the flashlight app, and climbed out of bed. The baseball bat was downstairs in the kitchen. Stupid. I should have brought it up. I stood there for what felt like hours, staring at the door, phone gripped tight in my sweating palm. The silence stretched out, broken only by my ragged breathing. Finally, I gathered my courage and yanked the door open. The hallway was empty. The motion-activated nightlight cast a pale glow over the hardwood floor. Nothing moved in the shadows. I checked every room upstairs and went down to the first floor. Everything was locked. The alarm system showed no signs of entry, but I knew what I'd heard. I spent the Rest of the night in the living room with every light on bad across my lap, jumping at every creak and groan of the old house settling morning, came eventually in the harsh light of day. I felt foolish stress and isolation. Playing tricks on my mind, that's all it was I needed to get out more maybe start. Dating again, I called in sick to work and spent the day installing more security cameras, adding motion sensors. Replacing the old locks with heavy-duty deadbolts, the hardware store clerk gave me odd looks as he rang up my purchases. But I didn't care that night. I double-checked every lock, tested every camera, and went to bed with the bat propped. Against my nightstand, I left the bedside lamp on sleep, came in fits, and starts every. Sound jolted me awake the furnace, kicking on branches, scratching against the windows, the ice maker dropping cubes. At 2:07 a.m. the laughter started again. This time it came from inside my closet. The sound was different now, still wet and gurgling, but with a new edge to it, almost hungry. I lay frozen in bed. Staring at the closet door was closed, but I could see movement in the gap underneath, something shifting in the darkness beyond. The laughter grew louder, more insistent. The door began to vibrate. Slightly in its frame, I grabbed the bat and phone backing toward my bedroom door. My hand shook so badly, I nearly dropped both. The closet door started to open. I ran down the hallway, taking the stairs two at a time, nearly falling in my panic. The laughter followed, echoing off the walls, seeming to come from everywhere at once. I made it to the kitchen, fumbling with my car keys. I had to get out, had to. The laughter stopped in the sudden silence. I heard something wet hitting the floor behind me, slow, heavy drops. Drip, drip, drip. I turned around. The kitchen was empty, but there on the floor, dark glistening spots leading from the doorway to where I stood. I touched one with trembling fingers. It was warm and sticky. The laughter erupted again right next to my ear, hot, wet breath on my neck. I ran out of the house in my pajamas, jumped in my car, and drove. I didn't stop until I reached the 24-hour diner on the edge of town. The fluorescent lights and smell of coffee helped calm my racing heart. The elderly waitress didn't bat an eye at my appearance, just poured me a cup of coffee and left me alone in my booth. I spent the rest of the night there planning my next move. I couldn't go back to the house, not alone. But who would believe me when dawn broke? I called Mike, my oldest friend from college, who lived a few hours away. He was a contractor who would help me fix up the house when I first moved, and I need your help, I said when he answered. Something's wrong with the house. Mike arrived that afternoon. He listened to my story without interrupting, then helped me do a thorough inspection of the house. We checked every corner, crawl space, and vent, found nothing could be raccoons in. The walls, he suggested they could make some weird noises. I didn't bother arguing. How could I explain the wet footprints that the breath on my neck? Mike agreed to stay a few days to help figure things out. We set up camping CS in the living room. Safety and numbers. The first night passed quietly, so did the second. On the third night at 2:07 a.m. the laughter started again. It woke us both. Mike sat up on his cot, eyes wide. What the hell is that? The sound came from the kitchen, that horrible wet gurgling laugh. You hear it too? I whispered. Mike nodded slowly. That's not raccoons. We grabbed our phones and the bat moving toward the kitchen. The laughter grew louder with each step. The kitchen was dark. The motion sensor light should have activated when we entered, but it remained dead. The laughter seemed to fill the room, now bouncing off the walls, making it impossible to tell where it was coming from. Mike fumbled for the light switch. Nothing happened. Powers out, he said, voice tight. Our phone lights carved weak circles in the darkness. The beams caught something moving near the ceiling, a darker shadow against the shadows. The laughter stopped in the sudden silence. We heard something moving across the ceiling, not footsteps, more like something dragging itself overhead, leaving wet trails behind. A drop of warm liquid hit my shoulder. Run, Mike said. We bolted Ed for the front door behind us. The laughter erupted again, closer, now pursuing us into the night. We didn't stop running until we reached Mike's truck. The engine roared to life, and we peeled out of the driveway. Gravel spraying behind us. In the rear view mirror, I saw something standing in my doorway, a darker shape against the darkness. It raised one long twisted arm in farewell. Then it laughed. We drove straight to Mike's house. His wife, Sarah, didn't ask questions. when we showed up at 3 a.m. just made up the guest room and poured us both stiff drinks. The next day, Mike called in some favors a priest. Came to bless the house. A paranormal investigator set up cameras and recording equipment. An old woman who claimed to sense spirits walked through every room burning sage and muttering prayers. None of them found anything. Concrete, the cameras showed nothing but ordinary shadows the recordings picked. Up no ghostly voices. The spirit-sensitive woman just shook her head and said the house felt heavy, but they all agreed on one thing: whatever was in that house wasn't natural. I put the house up for sale the next day, let someone else deal with it. I moved in with Mike and Sarah temporarily while looking for a new place closer to town. The realtor called a week later. No one was interested. The house had a reputation. Now stories about strange noises, wet footprints, mysterious laughter in the night. So here I am stuck with a house I can't sell and can't live in. I drive by sometimes, always during daylight hours. It looks perfectly normal from the outside, just another aging New England home, needing some paint and minor repairs. But sometimes when I drive past at night, I see lights moving inside, even though the power's been shut off. And just once I heard that familiar wet laugh floating on the night air. I keep driving now. I don't slow down anymore to look, but sometimes in my dreams I'm back in that kitchen watching dark drops fall from the ceiling, listening to that horrible laughter getting closer and closer. And sometimes on very quiet nights I wake at exactly 2:07 a.m., straining my ears, half expecting to hear that sound again. So far it hasn't found me, but I keep the baseball bat next to my bed just in case, and I never ever laugh at night anymore. The first time I felt it, I was scraping old wallpaper off the wall next to the attic stairs. A wave of heat pressed against my back, like standing too close to a space heater. I turned around. Nothing was there, just the empty hallway and the worn wooden steps leading up to the attic. I went back to work. The heat returned stronger this time, along with the pressure between my shoulder blades, like someone standing right behind me, breathing down my neck. That was 3 weeks ago now. I'm sitting at my kitchen table at 3 a.m. staring at a stack of old family photos I found in the attic, and my hands won't stop shaking. I inherited this house from my great Aunt Martha 6 months ago. I never knew her well. She was the family recluse, the odd sister who never married and rarely left the property. When her lawyer called to tell me I was her sole heir, I was shocked. I'd only visited the house twice as a kid, and the memories were vague: creaky floors, musty rooms, and Martha shuffling around in her slippers, muttering to herself. The house needed work, a lot of work. The wiring was ancient, the plumbing leaked, and every surface was covered in decades of grime and peeling wallpaper. But property values in the area were rising, and I figured I could fix it up and sell it for a decent profit. I took a leave of absence from my job and moved in with just the essentials: my tools, a mattress, and my laptop. The first 2 weeks were normal. I stripped wallpaper, patched holes, and updated the electrical system. The work was tedious but straightforward. Then came that day by the attic stairs. After the second time I felt the heat and pressure, I convinced myself it was just a draft or my imagination. Old houses make weird air currents, right? But it kept happening every time I worked near those stairs. The same sensation would creep up on me. The heat would start gradually, then build until sweat ran down my back. The pressure would increase until I could barely stand it, like someone pressing their full weight against me. I started avoiding that section of the hallway. I'd take the long way around to reach the other rooms. I told myself I was being ridiculous, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me from those stairs. Last night, I finally forced myself to climb up to the attic. I needed to check the insulation anyway, and I was sick of letting this weird fear control me. I grabbed my flashlight and toolbox and started up the steps. The heat hit me halfway up. My shirt stuck to my back. Instantly, the pressure came next, so strong I had to grab the railing to keep from stumbling backward. My flashlight beam bounced off dusty boxes and old furniture. The air was thick with decades of accumulated dust. I pushed through the sensation and made it to the top. The attic was huge, running the full length of the house. Boxes and Trunks were stacked everywhere along with sheet-covered furniture and piles of yellowing newspapers. I spotted a box labeled photos and grabbed it thinking maybe I'd find some old pictures of the house to guide my renovation. The box was full of albums and loose photographs spanning at least 50 years. I brought them downstairs to the kitchen where the light was better. Most were typical family photos, picnics, holidays, birthdays. But then I found one that made my blood run cold. It was a photo of the attic stairs taken from the hallway below. The image was faded and slightly blurry, probably from the 1970s, based on the wood paneling visible on the walls. But what caught my eye was the dark figure standing halfway up the steps. At first, I thought it was just a shadow or a problem with the photo, but the more I looked, the more distinct it became. It was definitely human-shaped, but completely black, like a silhouette cut from dark paper. The figure appeared to be facing down toward the camera. My hands started shaking. I dug through the rest of the photos. There were many more different years, different times of day, different angles. But in every photo of those stairs, that dark figure was there, always in the same spot, always facing down. I found a photo dated 1962 that showed a family gathering. The stairs were visible in the background, and there was a figure. 1975, Martha's birthday party. The figure stood on the stairs behind the celebrating group. 1989, a Christmas morning photo. The figure lurked in the shadows of the stairwell while children opened presents in the foreground. Some of the photos had notes on the back. Most were just dates and names, but one caught my eye. Was another shot of the stairs. This one from 1983, Martha's handwriting on the back read, "It never leaves that spot. I've learned to live with it." I spent the next few hours spreading photos across the kitchen table, arranging them chronologically. The figure first appeared in photos from 1960, right after Martha moved into the house it was in. Every single photo of the stairs taken after that date, always the same position, always watching. My rational mind tried to find explanations, a trick of light and shadow, a fault in the camera, Martha playing some kind of decades-long prank. But I knew what I'd felt on those stairs, the heat, the pressure, the sensation of being watched. I pulled out my phone and opened my photo gallery 2 weeks ago. I'd taken some before pictures to document the renovation. I scrolled to the ones I'd taken of the hallway and stairs. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. There was the same dark figure in my photos, in my digital 21st century photos. The sound of creaking would made me jump. It came from upstairs, from the direction of the attic stairs. I sat absolutely still, barely breathing. Another creak, like someone shifting their weight on old boards. The kitchen suddenly felt too exposed. I grabbed the photos in my phone and retreated to my bedroom, locking the door behind me. I pushed a chair under the handle for good measure. That was 4 hours ago. I haven't heard any more noises, but I can't sleep. I keep staring at the photos spread across my bed, trying to make sense of them, trying to understand what's been watching me from those stairs. The oldest photos show the house when it was first built in the 1920s. No figure on the stairs, nothing unusual at all. But something changed in 1960. What happened that year? What brought that thing here? I pull up my laptop and start searching through property records and old newspaper archives. In 1960, Martha bought the house from the original owners, the Henderson family. They'd lived here for 40 years without any reports of strange occurrences. So what changed when Martha moved? And I dig deeper into Martha's history. She was a nurse at the local hospital from 1955 to 1985, never married, lived alone, kept to herself. Nothing unusual stands out until I find an art eye from 1960. It describes a fire at the hospital where Martha worked. 3 people died, including a patient named James Sullivan who was trapped in his room on the 3rd floor. My heart starts pounding as I read more. Sullivan had been a long-term patient paralyzed from a car accident. He was under Martha's care. According to the article, she tried to reach him during the fire, but was pushed back by the heat and smoke. She watched from the stairs as his room burned. The stairs, she watched from the stairs. I think about the figure on my attic steps, the way it always faces down, watching the heat I feel whenever I get close, the crushing pressure, like someone desperately trying to move to push through an invisible barrier the sun is. Coming up now in a few hours, I need to call a contractor about the electrical work in the upstairs hallway part of me. Wants to sell the house immediately to run from whatever entity has attached itself to those stairs, but I keep. Thinking about Martha's note, I've learned to live with it. She stayed in this house for over 50 years sharing it. With whatever stands on those stairs, did she feel guilty about not saving Sullivan? Did she understand that his presence wasn't meant to be threatening, but watching, waiting, remembering, I looked at the most recent photo. I took the one on my phone. The figure is there as clear as ever, but in the morning light it doesn't seem as menacing. It looks patient, like it's been standing guard all these years, keeping vigil on those steps. I get up and walk to my bedroom door. I can hear the house settling, the normal creaks and groans of old wood, but now there's something else. A feeling I hadn't noticed before, not fear, exactly, more like awareness. Acknowledgement. I unlock the door and step into the hallway. The attic stairs are visible at the end of the corridor. I take a deep breath and walk toward them. The heat starts immediately, but I don't fight it this time. The pressure builds between my shoulder blades and I let it come. I stop at the bottom of the stairs and look up. I can't see anything unusual, but I know it's there watching, waiting. Maybe that's all it's ever done. Good morning, I say quietly, feeling slightly ridiculous. Talking to an empty staircase. I'm going to be working on the wiring today. I hope that's okay. The pressure on my back eases slightly. The heat fades to a gentle warmth, like sunlight through a window. I take that as a yes. I've been in this house for 6 months now. The renovation is almost complete, but I'm not sure I want to sell anymore. There's something about this place, about the presence that shares it with me, Martha, that maybe that's why she left it to me. I head to the kitchen to make coffee, already planning my work for the day. The stairs creak behind me, but I don't turn around. Some things I'm learning are better left unobserved. Some presences are meant to be felt, not seen. The figure will be there when I pass the stairs again, standing its eternal watch. The heat will come and the pressure, and I'll know I'm not alone in this house. It's not exactly comfort, but it's something close to it. A shared vigil, a quiet understanding. I pour my coffee and look out the kitchen window at the rising sun. In a few hours, the contractor will arrive, and I'll have to explain why we need to work around the attic stairs, why that section of the hallway needs to stay exactly as it is. I'm not sure what I'll say. How do you explain sharing your house with a shadow? But that's a problem for later. For now, I sit with my coffee and listen to the old house wake up around me. Somewhere above on the attic stairs, my unusual housemate keeps its watch. The morning light streams through the windows, and I feel the familiar warmth on my back, constant as a heartbeat, steady as time itself. My hands are still shaking as I type this. I need to get it down while it's fresh in my mind, while I can still remember every detail. It happened 3 hours ago on Route 23, that long stretch of road that cuts through Morrison County. I've driven it hundreds of times, but never like this, never seen anything like this. I was heading home from a late shift at the factory. It was 2:47 a.m. I remember checking my phone at a stop sign, wondering if Sarah would still be awake. When I got home, the radio was playing some old country song. Turned down low, my headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the yellow lines that seemed to stretch endlessly into the night. The road was empty. It always is at that hour. Just me, my old Ford pickup, and miles of cornfields on either side. The harvest was weeks ago, leaving only dry stalks that rustled in the wind. The moon hung full and bright overhead, casting everything in that weird silver light that makes familiar things look strange. I first noticed something was off when my truck's temperature gauge started dropping. It had been a cool night, maybe 45 degrees, but suddenly the digital readout showed 38, then 35, then 32. My breath started fogging in front of my face. The heater was still running full blast, but it felt like someone had opened all the windows. That's when I saw it in my peripheral vision, something moving alongside the road, keeping pace with my truck. I was doing about 50 math, but whatever it was, it matched my speed exactly. At first, I thought it was just shadows playing tricks on me, or maybe a deer running parallel to the road, but deer don't run that fast, and they definitely don't run like that. I slowed down to get a better look. The figure Slowed to, staying perfectly aligned with my passenger side window it was. Running on two legs, but the movement was all wrong. The stride was too long, too fluid, like watching someone move under. Water except at highway speeds. My headlights caught it full on when I turned slightly to the right. The figure was tall, maybe 7 feet, but thin, impossibly thin. Its skin looked gray in. The headlights, but not like human skin, more like wet clay or rubber. No clothes. No hair, just that smooth, uniform surface. Its arms were too long, hanging down past where knees should be, and they didn't swing as it ran, they just trailed behind. It like ribbons in the wind. The head was the worst part. It was elongated, stretched back, like it was being pulled by some invisible force. Where a face should have been, there was just smooth, featureless gray, no eyes, no mouth, no nose, just that blank stretched surface. Turned toward me as it ran. I hit the gas hard. The engine roared in my truck. Lurched forward 60 MAF 70-75. The figure kept pace, its legs moving in that impossible fluid motion. At 80 MEF, it started to fall behind, but only lightly. That's when it did something I'll never forget. It turned its head, that smooth, featureless head, a full 180 degrees to face me while still running forward, and then it changed direction in one instant. Without slowing down or turning its body, it veered sharply right and disappeared into the woods that lined that stretch. A road. I slammed on the brakes. I don't know why. Maybe some primitive part of my brain needed to know what I'd just seen was real. The truck screeched to a halt, leaving long black marks on the asphalt. I sat there, engine idling, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were white. The temperature gauge started climbing back up. 33, 35, 38. My breath stopped fogging. The night seemed normal again, except for one thing. Where the figure had turned into the woods, there were marks on the road, not footprints exactly, but depressions in the asphalt, like someone had taken a hot iron and pressed it into the surface, leaving perfect oval shapes in a line leading into the trees. I got out of the truck. I had to see them up close. The marks were about 18 in long and 8 in wide. They were deep, maybe 2 in into the solid asphalt, and the edges were smooth, like they'd been molded. I touched one. It was cold, colder than the air around it. My fingertips went in almost instantly. The trail of marks, LEDs straight into the woods. The trees were thick. They're old oaks and maples with heavy branches that blocked out the moonlight. I could see maybe 20 feet in where the marks continued in that straight line, ignoring trees and undergrowth, just pressing through everything in their path. I took out my phone and started taking pictures. They came out clear. The marks were definitely they're perfectly visible in the flash. I took video to walking along the line of impressions. That's when I heard a sound from deep in the woods, like someone dragging something heavy through fallen leaves, but fast, too fast for anything natural. I ran back to my truck. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped my keys twice before getting them in the ignition. As I pulled away, I kept checking my mirrors, but the road behind me was empty, just those marks in the asphalt getting smaller and smaller, until they disappeared in the darkness. I drove straight to the police station. In Morrison, Officer Jenkins was on duty. I've known him for years. Our kids go to the same school. I showed him the pictures and videos. He listened to my story without interrupting, then made some calls. By sunrise, there were state police and some other officials at the site. They took samples of the marks, measurements, photographs, asked me the same questions over and over. That was 6 hours ago. They're still out there from what I hear. Some kind of scientist showed up from the state university. They're analyzing the marks running tests. Officer Jenkins called an hour ago to tell me they found something strange in the woods, a trail of those same marks, running for miles straight, as an arrow, ignoring all obstacles, trees, rocks even. A small stream, nothing deflected the path. I'm sitting at my kitchen table now, trying to make sense of it all. Sarah's asleep upstairs. I told her I got held up at work. I haven't decided if I'm going to tell her what really happened. How do you tell someone you saw something that shouldn't exist? The local news is already picking up the story there, calling it a mysterious vandalism case or suggesting it might be some kind of elaborate prank. But I know what I saw. That figure running alongside my truck wasn't human. The way it moved, the impossible speed, that blank face, it was Something else entirely I've called in sick to work I can't face that drive home again not yet. Not while I keep seeing that smooth gray head turning to face me in my mind, not while I remember the way it just changed. Direction defying physics, and everything I thought I knew about how things move in this world the police want me to come. In later today to make a formal statement, they're bringing in some experts from out of state, they say. People who deal with unusual phenomena. I don't know what to tell them. How do you describe something that shouldn't be? Possible I keep checking my phone, looking at the pictures and videos. I took there's still clear as. Day of the marks in the asphalt, the straight line disappearing into the woods, proof that it wasn't just my imagination, that something really did run alongside my truck last night at impossible speeds, but there's something else bothering me, something I noticed when I was reviewing the videos earlier. In one of them when I was filming the marks leading into the woods, there's a frame, just one frame, where something moves in the background. It's blurry and dark, but I can make out that same elongated head turn at an impossible angle facing directly at the camera from between two trees. I've tried to convince myself it's just a shadow or a trick of the light, but I know what I saw, and I know it saw me too. Whatever that thing was, it was aware, it knew I was watching. And for some reason it wanted me to see it turn into those woods. The temperature in my kitchen just dropped 10 degrees. The coffee in my mug is starting to frost over outside through my window. I can see the wind has picked up, making the trees sway, but the leaves are moving in the wrong direction, like they're being pulled towards something. I'm going to stop writing now. I need to check all the doors and windows, make sure everything's locked, the sun is up. But somehow that doesn't make me feel any safer, not when I know what's out there, running faster than any human could, leaving those impossible marks in its wake. If you're driving on Route 23 late at night, keep your eyes on the road. Don't look to the side. If you see movement in your peripheral vision, and whatever you do, don't stop. If you see something running alongside your car, just keep driving as fast as you can until you're somewhere with lights and people and normal things that move the way they're supposed to, because now I know we're not alone out here in the dark. There are things that share our world, things that can run alongside our cars on empty rural roads, things that leave marks in solid asphalt like it's soft clay, things that watch us with faces that aren't faces, moving in ways that shouldn't be possible. I don't know what it was that I saw on Route 23. I don't know if I'll ever know, but I do know one thing: I'm never driving that road at night again. Some questions are better left unanswered, answered. Some mysteries should stay mysteries. The temperature is dropping again. I need to go check the locks one more time, and maybe, just maybe, I'll catch a glimpse of something tall and gray moving through my backyard, its head turned at an impossible angle, watching me with a face that isn't a face. But this time I won't stop to take pictures. This time I'll do what I should have done on that dark road: keep moving, keep going, and try to forget what I saw, because some things in this world aren't meant to be seen, aren't meant to be understood. Some things should stay in the shadows, running alongside empty roads in the dead of night, leaving their impossible marks in there. Wake the first thump hit at 3:17 a.m. A heavy footstep on old wood, followed by another and another. Someone was walking down the basement stairs in my brother Dave's house, except Dave was away on business in Seattle, and I was alone in the house. I sat up in the guest bed, my t-shirt sticking to my back. The steps continued their slow descent. Thump, thump, thump. My phone showed 7 missed calls from my ex-wife and a 12% battery. I'd forgotten to plug it in. Again, the footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs. A pause, then they started again from the top. I'd arrived at Dave's place 3 days ago after Karen kicked me out. Third time this year. She'd found the empty whiskey bottles I'd hidden in the garage behind the Christmas decorations, just until I get back on my feet. I'd told Dave over the phone. He'd sighed, but said yes, he always did. The footsteps kept their rhythm down. Pause. Start again from the top down. Pause. Start again. My hand shook as I pulled on my jeans. The guest room was on the second floor, directly above the kitchen. The basement door was in the kitchen. I knew the layout. Well, I'd helped Dave renovate the place 5 years ago, before the drinking got bad, before Karen started finding bottles. Thump, thump, thump. I grabbed my phone's flashlight and the baseball bat from beside the bed. Dave had left it there just in case when he showed me the room. The steps creaked under my feet as I moved toward the hallway. Each sound felt too loud, like they were competing with. The footsteps below the kitchen was dark moonlight cut through the windows. Casting long shadows across the linoleum floor of the basement door stood closed, its outline barely visible in the darkness. The footsteps continued their pattern. Behind it, my throat was dry. I needed a drink. The thought came automatically, followed by the usual wave of shame. Focus the footsteps with a problem. Now focus on the footsteps. I pressed my ear against the door. The sounds were clearer. Now heavy boots on wooden stairs, moving with mechanical precision. Down, pause, start again from the top. The wood didn't creak like it should under that weight. The steps sounded wrong. My phone buzzed. Karen's name lit up the screen. Not now. I declined the call, and my battery dropped to 11%. The door handle was cold against my palm. I tightened my grip on the bat. Thumb finding the worn spot where the tape had peeled away. The footsteps continued their rhythm, oblivious or uncaring about my presence. I pulled the door open. The hinges wind. I should have oiled them when Dave asked last year. The basement gaped below, a mouth of absolute darkness that swallowed my phone's weak light. The footsteps stopped. The silence pressed against my ears. I could hear my own breathing too fast, and shallow sweat rolled down my back. The air from the basement carried the smell of old wood and concrete dust. Then the footsteps started again from the top, but I could see the stairs now illuminated by my phone. They were empty. My light traced the steps, 14 of them. I remembered that from the renovation, each one bare wood unfinished, because Dave kept talking about carpeting them someday. Nothing moved on them, but the footsteps descended. Thump, thump, thump. The sound reached the bottom, paused, and began again from the top. My light showed nothing. The stairs were empty, but someone was walking down them over and over and over. I stepped onto the first stair. The wood creeped under my weight, a different sound from the phantom footsteps. Those were heavier, more final. My phone battery dropped to 10%. Another step down. The footsteps continued their pattern, passing through the space where I stood. No temperature change, no brush of movement, just the sound of boots on with 3 steps down for the basement. Darkness pressed closer. My phone light caught the edges of Dave's workbench at the bottom of the ST stairs as tools hanging in neat rows on the wall, everything exactly where it should be. Halfway down now, the footsteps kept their pace, walking through me. As they descended, my hands were slick with sweat on the bat, and phone 9 steps down, 10. The battery warning flashed, 9%. The footsteps reached the bottom again, paused, and started their descent. Once more I reached the basement floor, concrete cold through my socks. Eyed forgotten shoes. My light swept the space. Dave's workshop took up half. The basement tables lined with projects in various stages of completion. The other half was storage boxes of holiday decorations, old furniture. Karen's craft supplies from when she used to visit. The footsteps continued above me, now down. Pause, reset, down, pause, reset. My phone caught something on Dave's workbench, a paper held down by a hammer. Dave's handwriting rushed, but readable. John had to leave for Seattle, early business. Emergency, make yourself at home, but don't go in the basement. Really important. It will explain when I get back. Dave. The footsteps kept their rhythm. My phone dimmed to save power, 8%. Battery. I should have gone back upstairs. Should have called Dave. Should have left the house. Should have done anything except what I did next. But I'd spent 3 years making bad decisions. Why stop now? I moved deeper into the basement. The footsteps continued their pattern on the stairs. Behind me, a metronomic rhythm of boots. Onward, my light caught more of Dave's workshop. The tools hung perfectly aligned on their hooks, level measure. Dave had always been the methodical one. Something was different about the tools. I stepped closer. Each tool was secured to its outline on the wall, but the outlines were wrong. They didn't match the tools. A hammer hung where a saw was outlined. A wrench occupied the space marked for a drill. I reached for the hammer. As my fingers touched the handle, the footsteps stopped. The silence hit like a physical thing. My breath sounded too loud in the sudden quiet. The hammer felt wrong in my hand, too light, like it was hollow behind me. A new sound started. Not footsteps this time, the scrape of metal on metal, coming from deep in the storage area. My phone flashed another Warning 7% the light. Dimmed further, the scraping grew louder. Something caught my light at the edge of the storage area, a reflection where there shouldn't be one metal, where Dave stored cardboard boxes. I moved closer. The boxes were wrong. They looked like cardboard from a distance, but up close I could see the truth metal painted to look like. Cardboard perfect replicas of moving boxes, holiday decoration containers, and storage bins. The scraping sound came from behind them, regular, rhythmic like. The footsteps had been my phone light, showed gaps between the metal boxes, spaces just wide enough to see through. 6% battery. I leaned forward, pressing my eye to one of the gaps my light revealed. More metal beyond walls of it, spanning the space where the storage room should be. The scraping grew louder. Something moved in the darkness beyond the metal walls. Something big. My phone died. The darkness was complete. The scraping stopped. Then behind me the footsteps began again from the top of the stairs down. Pause. Reset. I dropped the bat. It hit the concrete with a clang that echoed off the metal walls. Not concrete. More metal painted to look like concrete. The storage boxes scraped against each other as something pushed them aside. Heavy steps approached, not from the stairs this time, but from the darkness beyond the false storage area. I ran. My feet found the stairs in the darkness. Muscle memory from helping install them. The phantom footsteps continued their path pattern, passing through me as I climbed. My shoulder hit the wall. Real with this time I could feel the difference. 13 steps up. 14. I slammed the basement door behind me and turned the lock. For a moment nothing but my own gasping breath and the pounding of my heart. Then the footsteps started again. Down. Pause. Reset. And beneath them a new sound, metal scraping against metal, growing louder. I didn't pack, didn't change, didn't even put on shoes. I grabbed my keys and ran. The sun was rising when I pulled into the gas station 50 miles away. My hand shook as I plugged in my phone and dialed Dave's number. He answered on the first ring. John, are you okay, Dave? I said, what the hell is in your basement? A long pause. The footsteps echoed in my memory. Down. Pause. Reset. I can't tell you, he said finally, but you need to tell me exactly what you saw, and you need to tell me if it saw you. Behind his voice I heard something, a familiar sound muffled by distance and phone static. Footsteps walking downstairs. I hung up and started driving again. I haven't stopped since. The bottles stay in the trunk, now untouched. I need to stay sharp, stay focused, because sometimes when I let my guard down I hear them footsteps walking downstairs over and over and over, and underneath them growing louder. The sound of metal scraping against metal. Karen keeps calling Dave too, but I can't answer, can't risk stopping, can't risk sleeping too long in one place, because the sound follows me now. Down. Pause. Reset. Always the same pattern, always getting closer. My car's been running fine, handling the endless driving well, though lately the engine's been making an odd sound, not the usual mechanical noises. It sounds like footsteps walking downstairs. The splintered door hung off its hinges. When I pushed it, the creak echoed through the empty field behind my old family home. 25 years since I'd last set foot in this barn, but the musty smell hit me exactly the same. Hay, rust, and something else I couldn't place. Something darker. I stood in the doorway, letting my eyes adjust to the dim light filtering through gaps in the wooden slats. Dust particles floated in the air. The barn looked smaller than I remembered, but no less imposing. My real estate agent had insisted I check every structure on the property before listing it, and this was the last one. Just a quick walkthrough. I told myself then I could get back to Chicago and forget about this place again. The floorboards groaned under my feet as I stepped inside. Broken farm equipment lay scattered around. An old tractor with missing wheels, rusted tools I couldn't name, empty feed bags rotting in corners. Standard abandoned barn stuff, but something made the hair on my neck stand up. A feeling of being watched, maybe, or remembered. I pulled out my phone's flashlight and swept the beam across the walls. That's when I saw the first name carved deep into a wooden post about chest height. Michael P. Below it, Sarah K. More names sprawled across the beam, some so old they'd almost worn away. My hand trembled slightly as I moved the light higher, following the trail of carved letters. Then I froze. There it was, Unmistakable David Arendt's my name in my own 12-year-old handwriting, but I had no memory of carving it, none at all. A flutter of movement caught my eye. Something had fallen from the hall loft above, drifting down in the shaft of light from a hole in the roof. I walked over and picked it up, a photograph old. Increased the image showed a man standing in front of this very barn, but his face had been scratched out with what looked like knife marks deepened. Angry scratches my throat. When dry, I remembered my Aunt Clara's warnings when I was a kid, how she grabbed my arm if I wandered too close to the barn. That place is cursed, she'd whisper, has been since before you were born. We all thought she was just being dramatic, but now I heard a soft thump from above. My pulse quickened. Probably just a bird, I thought, but I swept the flashlight beam up toward the hall loft. Anyway, more photographs were scattered across the wooden floor. Up there, dozens of them. The ladder to the loft looked barely stable, half the rungs missing or rotted through. But I had to know. I tested my weight on the first solid-looking rung it held. Slowly I began to climb. The loft smelled worse than below, mold and decay in that same unidentifiable darkness. My flashlight revealed more names carved everywhere, covering every surface, and photographs, so many photographs spread out like some twisted art installation, all of different people, all with their faces violently scratched out. I picked up another photo. This one was newer than the first, maybe from the 80s, based on the clothes, a family posing by a car there. Faces obliterated. Another showed what looked like a high school graduation. Another a wedding, all to face the same way. My foot hit something solid, a metal box, old, but not rusted, padlock shut. I grabbed it and nearly dropped it when I heard another sound from below, like footsteps, but dragging, scraping. I swung the flashlight toward the ladder. Nothing there, but the sound came again, closer. My heart hammered against my ribs. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees in an instant. I shoved the box under my arm and scrambled down the ladder, not caring about the creaking wood. My foot went through one rotten rung, but I yanked it free and kept going. The dragging sound followed, but I refused to look back. I burst out of the barn into the late afternoon sun, gasping. The door slammed behind me with a bang that echoed across the empty fields. I stood there for several minutes, just breathing, the metal box heavy under my arm, back in my rental car. I examined the box more closely. The padlock was old, but good quality. I'd need tools to open it. I glanced at the barn in my rear-view mirror as I drove away, just weathered wood and broken windows. But something shifted in one of those windows, a shadow moving when it shouldn't have. I called my Aunt Clara that night from my hotel room. She answered on the first ring, like she'd been waiting. You went in the barn, she said, not a question. How did you? I told you to sell that place without looking back. Some things need to stay buried, David. I found my name carved in there, Aunt Clara, and photographs, and this box. What the hell happened in that barn? She was quiet for so long. I thought the call had dropped and it started before you were born. People would go missing, not from our town, but travelers, drifters, no bodies ever found. But sometimes their cars would turn up on the old road behind the farm. My mouth went dry. What are you saying? Your grandfather, he wasn't well, David, after the war. Something in him broke. He'd have these episodes where he wouldn't remember things. Days would just disappear. Your grandmother tried to protect him, protect all of us. She locked up the barn, but he always found a way back. And I thought of all those scratched out faces. My hands started shaking. The police never proved anything. Clara continued, but people knew. They stopped coming around. Your father moved us all away when you were 13, told everyone it was for work, but really the box. I said, did you know about a metal box? Another long silence. Don't open it, David, please. Some doors shouldn't be open. I hung up and stared at the box sitting on the hotel desk. The padlock gleamed in the lamplight. I could drive back to Chicago tomorrow, throw the box in Lake Michigan, pretend I never found it, list the property as is, and let some developer tear it all down. But I knew I wouldn't. I needed to know. Maybe not tonight, but soon. That was 3 days ago. I'm still in the hotel staring at the box. I over and picked it up, a photograph old. Increased the image showed a man standing in front of this very barn, but his face had been scratched out with what looked like knife marks deepened. Angry scratches my throat. When dry, I remember my Aunt Clara's warnings when I was a kid, how she grabbed my arm if I wandered too close to the barn. That place is cursed, she whispered, has been since before you were born, we all. Thought she was just being dramatic, but now I heard a soft thump from above my pulse quickened, probably just a bird, I thought, but I swept the flashlight beam up toward the high loft. Anyway, more photographs were scattered across the wooden floor, up there dozens of them. The ladder to the loft looked barely stable, half the rungs missing or rotted through. But I had to know. I tested my weight on the first solid-looking rung it held. Slowly I began to climb. The loft smelled worse than below, mold and decay in that same unidentifiable darkness. My flashlight revealed more names carved everywhere, covering every surface, and photographs, so many photographs spread out like some twisted art installation. All of different people, all with their faces violently scratched out. I picked up another photo. This one was newer than the first, maybe from the 80s, based on the clothes of family posing by a car there. Faces obliterated. Another showed what looked like a high school graduation, another a wedding, all to face the same way. My foot hit something solid, a metal box, old, but not rusted, padlock shut. I grabbed it and nearly dropped it when I heard another sound from below, like footsteps, but dragging, scraping. I swung the flashlight toward the ladder. Nothing there, but the sound came again, closer. My heart hammered against my ribs. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees in an instant. I shoved the box under my arm and scrambled down the ladder, not caring about the creaking. With my foot went through one rotten rung, but I yanked it free and kept going. The dragging sound followed, but I refused to look back. I burst out of the barn into the late afternoon sun, gasping. The door slammed behind me with a bang that echoed across the empty fields. I stood there for several minutes, just breathing, the metal box heavy under my arm, back in my rental car. I examined the box more closely. The padlock was old but good quality. I'd need tools to open it. I glanced at the barn in my rear view mirror as I drove away. Just weathered wood and broken windows, but something shifted in one of those windows, a shadow moving when it shouldn't have. I called my Aunt Clara that night from my hotel room. She answered on the first ring, like she'd been waiting. You went in the barn, she said, not a question. How did you? I told you to sell that place without looking back. Some things need to stay buried, David. I found my name carved in there, Aunt Clara, and photographs in this box. What the hell happened in that barn? She was quiet for so long. I thought the call had dropped in. It started before you were born. People would go missing, not from our town, but travelers, drifters, no bodies ever found. But sometimes their cars would turn up on the old road behind the farm. My mouth went dry. What are you saying? Your grandfather, he wasn't well, David, after the war. Something in him broke. He'd have these episodes where he wouldn't remember things. Days would just disappear. Your grandmother tried to protect him, protect all of us. She locked up the barn, but he always found a way back. And I thought of all those scratched out faces. My hands started shaking. The police never proved anything, Clara continued, but people knew. They stopped coming around. Your father moved us all away when you were 13, told everyone it was for work, but really the box. I said, did you know about a metal box? Another long silence. Don't open it, David, please. Some doors shouldn't be open. I hung up and stared at the box sitting on the hotel desk. The padlock gleamed in the lamplight. I could drive back to Chicago tomorrow, throw the box in Lake Michigan, pretend I never found it, list the property as is, and let some developer tear it all down. But I knew I wouldn't. I needed to know. Maybe not tonight, but soon. It was 3 days ago. I'm still in the hotel staring at the box. I bought bolt cutters this morning. They're sitting next to it, waiting. Every time I reach for them, I hear my aunt's voice. Some doors shouldn't be open, but I keep thinking about my name carved in that beam. When did I write it? Why don't I remember? What else don't I remember? The padlock feels cold under my fingers, like it's been storing up decades of secrets, waiting for someone to finally set them free. Maybe that someone is me. Maybe it has to be me. I pick up the bolt cutters. Their weight is reassuring, solid, real. Whatever's in this box, I tell myself it's just paper, just old photographs or letters or documents. Nothing that can hurt me now. Now the padlock breaks with a sharp snap. Inside, I find a stack of notebooks, my grandfather's journals, dated from 1946 to 1981. The handwriting starts neat, but grows increasingly erratic. Newspaper Clippings about missing persons, more photographs, these ones unmarked and at. The bottom a single envelope addressed to me, and my grandmother's handwriting the letter, inside, is short Dear David, if you're reading this, you found your way back to the barn. I'm sorry I tried to protect you from the truth, but maybe that was wrong. Your grandfather wasn't evil. The war changed and broke something inside that couldn't be fixed. The barn, it amplified whatever was broken made. Him see things that weren't there, made him do things he'd never do otherwise. You were so young when it started affecting you too, the nightmares, the sleep, walking, finding you in the barn. Carving names you couldn't remember carving. That's when your father, and I knew we had to get you away the barn. Feeds on darkness, David, not evil, just the regular darkness we all carry inside. Us, the regrets, the anger, the fear, it takes those feelings and twists them. Makes them grow until they're not yours anymore. I should have burned it down years ago, but I couldn't because some small part of me still hoped your grandfather would come back to us, that whatever the barn took from him could be returned. I was wrong. Burn it all, David, the barn, the photographs, these journals. Burn it, and don't look back. Don't let it take from you what it took from him with. Love, Grandma Marie. I set the letter down with shaking hands through my hotel window. I can see the distant shape of the barn silhouetted against the setting sun. Even from here, it seems to watch me. To wait, my phone rings, making me jump. It's Aunt Clara again. Did you open it? She asked without preamble. Yes. She sighed heavily. Then you know what needs to be done. I look at the journal spread across the hotel bed. So many secrets, so many answers. But my grandmother was right. Some answers aren't worth the cost. I'll take care of it tonight. I tell Clara, be careful. She says that place it doesn't like to let go easily. I hang up and start gathering the journals and photographs. The sun has almost set, painting the sky blood red. In a few hours it will be dark enough. I have the gasoline in my car, bought it this morning along with the bolt cutters. 5 gallons should be enough, more than enough. The barn can keep its darkness tonight. I'm giving it back to the light. But first I need to make one last trip inside, one last climb up to that hay loft. I need to find my name among all those carvings and do what I should have done 25 years ago. Cut it out, remove all trace that I was ever there, that any of us were ever there. Some chains need to be broken, some curses need to end, and sometimes the only way forward is to burn the past to ashes and start again. I check my pocket for the matchboxes. They're waiting in a few hours. That barn will be nothing but memories and smoke. But for now I sit in my hotel room watching the sun sink behind it, watching shadows gather in its broken windows, wondering if somewhere in those twisted beams and rotting boards my grandfather's darkness still lingers, still waits. Night is falling. It's almost time. I stand and gather my supplies, flashlight, knife, gasoline, matches. The barn has taken enough for my family tonight. I take something back, peace, closure, a clean slate. The sun slips below the horizon, darkness falls. I grab my car keys. It's time to end this. 3 people died in this apartment in 1954. I know this now. I wish I didn't. I found a listing online of steel for a 1-bedroom in downtown Boston. The building dated back to the 1920s, all brick and ornate moldings. The real estate agent mentioned its historic charm at least 5 times during the showing. What she didn't mention was why the rent was so low, or why the previous tenant had left all their furniture behind. I moved in on a Tuesday. The first night was fine. The second night, 2. On the third night, I woke up at 3:17 a.m. to the sound of whispering. At first, I thought it was coming from the walls, maybe the pipes or the ventilation system in this old building. But as I lay there in bed, the whispers got clearer. They weren't forming words exactly, but they had a rhythm to them, like multiple people having a conversation just below the threshold of comprehension. I got up and walked through the apartment. The whispers stopped. The living room felt like a freezer compared to my bedroom. My breath came out in visible puffs. I checked the thermostat, 72 degrees, but my hands were shaking from the cold. The next morning, I ran into my neighbor in the hallway, Mrs. Chun from 4B. She was taking out her trash, moving slowly with her cane. How are you liking the apartment? She asked. It's good, though. The heating seems a bit uneven. She gave me a long look. How long have you been here? 3 days. She nodded slowly. That's about right. They usually don't Make it past a week. What do you mean the cold spots, the whispers you've noticed? I'm having you my stomach drop. How did you have lived here 30 years, Scene A? A lot of people come and go from that unit. They all leave within 7 days something. About that apartment isn't right, I wanted to laugh it off, but my mouth was dry. What happened there? Murder-suicide. 1954, a man killed his wife and daughter, then himself. The police found them all. In the bathtub that night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the old building made me jump. Around 2 a.m., the temperature dropped again. The cold spot had moved to my bedroom this time. The whispers started closer than before. I turned on all the lights and sat in the living room with the TV on. Around 4 a.m., the screen started flickering. The whisper has got louder. A dark shape moved in my peripheral vision. When the sun came up, I called the real estate agent. She didn't sound surprised when I said I wanted to break my lease. Just sighed and said she'd email me the paperwork. I started packing that afternoon as I was taking down clothes from the closet. A child's laugh echoed through the apartment, high and clear. Then a woman's scream. Cut short, I ran out with just my backpack and laptop, left everything else behind. Mrs. Chun was in the hallway again. 4 days. She said longer than most. I slept at a hotel that night. When I went back the next day with some friends to get my stuff, the apartment was empty. Not just of my things. All the furniture from the previous tenant was gone too. The rooms were completely bare, like no one had ever lived there. The real estate agent denied there had ever been furniture in the apartment. Said I must be confused, but I have photos on my phone from Movian Day showing the old couch, the dining table, the bed. I tried researching the 1,954 murders, found nothing in newspaper archives. Asked Mrs. Chin about it again, but her daughter said she'd moved to Florida months ago. The current tenant in 4B had never heard of her. Sometimes I drive by the building late at night. The windows of my old apartment are always dark, but sometimes when I look up at just the right moment, I see shapes moving behind the glass, and even from the street, I swear I can hear whispers. A for rent sign has been up for 6 months. Now the price keeps dropping. I wonder how many people have tried to live there since me. How many have lasted the full week? I have a new apartment now in a different part of the city. Modern building, concrete and steel. No history, no charm, no cold spots. I keep the heat on even in summer, and I never look at apartment listings in historic buildings anymore. But sometimes late at night, I still hear those whispers, not from the walls or the pipes, from my own memory. And I know that somewhere in that old brick building downtown, in that apartment with the ornate moldings and the low rent, someone else is hearing them too, for the first time, for what will probably be there last week there, because no one ever makes it past 7, even days the ghosts make sure of that. The first scream came at 11:42 p.m. I checked my watch because I wanted to note exactly when everything went wrong. I was stacking boxes of auto parts in aisle E47 of the Morgan and Sons warehouse when I heard a muffled cry that sounded like someone had their mouth covered. I froze with a timing belt box in my hands. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows between the tall metal shelves that stretched up toward the ceiling. On the night shift, I was used to being alone with just the hum of the ventilation system and the beeping of the occasional forklift backing up, but this sound was different, human. Wrong. My first thought was that Jimmy from receiving had hurt himself again. Last month he dropped the transmission on his foot and screamed so loud security came running, but Jimmy's shift ended at 10, and besides, the sound was too desperate. I set the box down slowly, trying not to make any noise. The concrete floor fell hard through my steel-toed boots as I stood completely still, listening for 10 seconds. Nothing but the usual warehouse sounds and movement caught my eye. A shadow sliding between the shelves, 3 aisles over, visible through gaps in the stacked inventory. Hello, I called out. My voice echoed off the metal shelving. No response. I should have called security right then, should have pulled out my phone and dialed the front desk where Mark sat watching his Netflix shows, but something held me back. Maybe the fear of looking stupid if it turned out to be nothing, or maybe just plain old curiosity. Instead, I started walking toward where I'd seen the movement. The wheels of my pallet jack squeaked as I pushed it aside. Each step echoed Slightly in the cavernous space, I passed Ali 48, then A49 moving as quietly as I could. While scanning between the shelves, the white labels on the boxes seemed to glow in the fluorescent light brake pads. Fuel pumps, alternators, everything in its assigned place except for whatever was. Moving in the shadows, another scream pierced the silence closer this time, and clearly female. It was followed by the sound of boxes falling and a man's voice saying shut up. The words were harsh. Angry, my heart started pounding against my ribs. I pulled my phone out, finger hovering over the keypad, but before I could dial, I heard running footsteps coming toward me. I ducked behind a pallet of oil filters. Just as two figures sprinted past the end of my aisle, the first was a woman in a torn blouse, her dark hair wild around her face, blood ran from her nose, and her eyes were wide with terror. Close behind her was a man in dark clothes reaching for her. With gloved hands, they disappeared around the corner toward the loading ducts. My hands shook as I tried to dial security. I fumbled and dropped the phone. It clattered on the concrete floor, the sound impossibly loud in the quiet warehouse. I heard the running footsteps stop. What was that? The man's voice growled, check it out. New footsteps approached, slower, deliberate. I pressed myself against the boxes, hardly daring to breathe. A shadow fell across the floor at the end of my aisle. I could either stay hidden and hope they didn't find me, or run. Neither option seemed good. The footsteps came closer. I saw the toe of a black boot edge into view, my muscles tense, ready to sprint. Then a crash echoed from the direction of the loading docks, followed by another scream. The boot disappeared as its owner ran toward the sound. I snatched up my phone and finally managed to dial security. It rang 4 times before Mark answered front desk. He said, sounding bored, Mark. There's someone in the warehouse, 2 people, a woman. I think she's hurt. Call the police. Whoa, slow down. What? Another crash interrupted him, followed by the sound of shattering glass. It came from the shipping office. Just call the police. I hung up and started running toward the noise. Looking back, I can't explain why I ran toward danger instead of away from it. Maybe I couldn't stand the thought of something happening to that woman, while maybe I was just stupid. The shipping office was a small room with windows looking out over the loading dock. As I approached, I saw that one of the windows was broken glass. Crunched under my boots, the woman was backed into a corner, holding a pair of scissors in front of her like a knife. The man in dark clothes stood between her and the door. Just come quietly, and this will be easier, he said, his voice eerily calm now. You're only making it worse. Stay back. The woman's voice shook, but her hands were steady on the scissors. I looked around frantically for a weapon. There was a fire extinguisher mounted on the wall near me. I grabbed it just as the man lunged for the woman. She slashed with the scissors, catching his arm. He cursed and stumbled back. I burst through the door and swung the fire extinguisher at his head. He must have heard me coming. He spun and caught the extinguisher, yanking it from my hands. His face was covered by a black ski mask. Cold blue eyes locked onto mine. Bad choice, he said. His fist slammed into my stomach. The air rushed out of my lungs, and I doubled over. He brought his knee up into my face. Pain exploded through my nose. I tasted blood. The woman screamed and charged forward with the scissors. The man turned to face her, giving me a chance to tackle him from